This is the Untold Italy travel podcast, and you're listening to episode number 215.
Ciao a tutti and benvenuti to Untold Italy, the travel podcast where you go to the towns and villages, mountains and lakes, hills and coastlines of Bella Italia. Each week, your host, Katy Clarke, takes you on a journey in search of magical landscapes, history, culture, wine, gelato, and of course, a whole lot of pasta. If you're dreaming of Italy and planning future adventures there, you've come to the right place.
Ciao everyone, welcome back to Untold Italy, where it is time for another escape and virtual wander through the landscapes and experiences you can only have in beautiful Italia. I've been thinking recently about many of you, including our trip planning clients, who have asked how you can explore regional Italy without a car. Now, if you've been listening along to this podcast for a little bit, you will know that this is where we think so much magic happens. The great tourist destinations of Italy are popular for good reason, but when you get away from the crowds and the must-see attractions, you discover very different highlights, and they're ones that capture your heart. We also know that the Italian road system and rules can be a little daunting, and it does put people off driving and renting a car and exploring those regional areas. So today I wanted to explore how you can experience regional Italy using public transport and mainly trains, which are faster and efficient. Our guest is Jo Mackay from villa bookings agency Bookings for You. Based in the UK, Jo has many years' experience travelling and exploring Italy and has some fantastic insights into the best places to go if you want to experience regional Italy without renting a car. So let's welcome her back to the show. Bentornata, Jo, and welcome back to the Untold Italy podcast.
Thanks so much, Katy. Lovely to be back.
Oh my goodness, it's so lovely to have you back on the show. It's been quite some time since you were here when we were in the thick of the pandemic, and thank goodness that's over. Anyway, many of our listeners may not have heard your voice, your beautiful British accent before, so would you mind introducing yourself and your business, Bookings for You?
Yeah, of course. Although I'd say my British accent is not half as nice as an Italian accent, but we'll go with the British accent. So I'm Jo Mackay. I'm the owner of Bookings for You, and Bookings for You is an award-winning villa rental company. So we have approximately 250 villas and apartments to rent all across Italy, from the Italian lakes in the north right down to Puglia and Sicily in the south.
Amazing, amazing. There is actually nothing quite like having a little home base in Italy. I've done that quite a few times and just staying in one spot. We're going to talk about how you can do that a little bit later. But I was wondering, I know, Jo, you've been in Italy just recently. Where did you go this time?
The week before last, we were in the Italian lakes. So we stayed on Lake Maggiore and we were viewing some new properties there. We saw about 8 new villas and apartments there that we're looking to take on for this season and then next season. Some are literally in the process of being built. And then we also headed across to Lake Como just for the day to see a couple of places there. So, yeah, we were very lucky. We got the sunshine in between kind of the rain. I think the day before we arrived was chucking it down with rain, and the day after we left was chucking it down with rain. But we had lovely clear blue skies and sunshine. It was great.
How beautiful. The lakes are so magical, actually. And
they are.
Our first podcast that we recorded was about Lake Maggiore, and that's episode number 72, I believe, if anyone wants to go and have a listen. But I think, a lot of people know Lake Como, don't they? But Maggiore is just not far from there and probably offers a little bit of a different experience.
Completely. I think Lake Como is more well known, and Lake Como is, it's so dramatic, the mountains literally rising from the lake. But Lake Maggiore is really special. It's got a real authenticity to it. So I think the most well-known areas around Stresa, but actually a lot of the lakes still kind of relatively unknown. And yeah, it's absolutely beautiful.
It really is. It really is. I was just wondering as well, like since, the last few years, everything is kind of, I don't know if it's back to normal or it's doing something different, but where are your clients traveling to? What are the places that they're really interested in and you're seeing in different trends where people are wanting to go these days?
So Italian lakes is proving very popular still. You often get people who've maybe been to Lake Garda or Lake Como, which are the more well-known lakes, and now they're coming much more to Lake Maggiore, Lake Orta. Tuscany's still popular, Umbria's popular, Puglia and Sicily definitely growing in popularity. I think they're regions where people are discovering them for the first time still, whereas people tend to have been to kind of Tuscany and are returning. So there's lots of regions we'd like to get into where we see demand increasing, but we don't yet have properties such as Emilia-Romagna and kind of further north as well, and kind of getting into the Dolomites more, not just for skiing, but, all year round. So there's lots of regions we'd like to get into.
Yeah. Italy is one of those places. It's just so diverse that, you can actually have two different holidays, in the one, vacation time. I was talking to a client today and she was going from Liguria down to Puglia, and even though they're both on the coast, they're so completely different. So I love that. Okay, so now listeners, Jo and I were having a chat about how we could help people really discover, I don't know about the word authentic. I have a little problem with the word authentic, but how to have a different experience outside of the major cities and tourist areas, because I feel like this is where the magic of Italy really comes to life. And would you agree, Jo? Do you think, that you find that you get like a different experience when you go outside of those major areas?
These days, sustainable travels very much come to the fore. And I think a big part of traveling sustainably is also about discovering those quieter areas, those areas off the beaten track. So it's no longer we're seeing people kind of tearing around Italy, just wanting to tick off all the major landmarks and go to all the major cities. Increasingly, people are wanting to go to the less well-known places. And it's more about, traveling slower, just taking time to connect to a place, its people, its history, its culture, its beliefs, and really getting off the beaten track. I think we read in the media a lot about places in Italy and all around the world where tourism is starting to have a negative impact. So we hear that in Venice with the numbers of people visiting. We hear about it in Cinque Terre, for example, and actually getting to those areas off the beaten track, those smaller destinations, starts to reward those businesses and people that live and work in those areas as well. And it spreads almost that kind of tourist income around. So there are huge benefits, not just to the traveller, but also to the location when you start visiting these less well-known areas.
Yeah. And I think it's worthwhile just staying and lingering a little bit, isn't it? Like instead, like you say, of rushing on to the next thing, because you can get a different experience of the area, like going into the coffee shop maybe 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row, and then suddenly they know your order, which is a peculiar Italian trait, which I don't know how they do, but it's so nice to be able to have those sort of personal experiences that you wouldn't have if you're zipping around the country at breakneck speed.
I agree. And you'll almost feel like you're suddenly the cafe owner's best friend because you've been there 2 or 3 times in the morning, but they're just so welcoming. It's lovely.
So I guess the challenge is with that is we want to get a little bit off the beaten path in Italy, is that sometimes I think the perception is, and it's, it's very true for a lot of areas, that you may need to rent a car and drive. And so that's what I asked Jo to come and talk to us about today, because we really wanted to uncover some places for our listeners to stay where they can really soak up all that magic that regional Italy has to offer, but maybe without a car.
Yeah, no, it's definitely possible. Certainly, if you were heading to an Italian city, you never want to hire a car. I've still got almost PTSD after kind of trying to drive a car around Florence in rush hour. But the good news is that you don't need to hire a car. Italian public transport is absolutely superb. And Italy actually has one of the most well-developed rail networks in Europe. It's great value for money. The trains are high-speed trains. They'll travel at 300 kilometers an hour. And in Italy have invested millions into their transport network. So it's very easy to get out and about, even to some of those smaller places, without having a car. And for some people, hiring a car and traveling in a foreign country is stressful. So if you can eliminate that stress by using public transport, that's got to be a good thing. So, you don't have to contend with those hairpin bends yourself. You don't have to work out the parking rules and what do the blue, yellow and white spaces mean, and the ZTL, limited traffic zones. You don't need to worry about fines. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for traveling using public transport. Trains are fantastic. And where you can't necessarily get to all the smaller places by train, usually you can get there and then hop on a bus, or if you're in the lakes, use the boat network. There's a whole range of options open to you.
Yeah, and then you can have your own little villa or apartment and settle in and go to the market and go to the coffee shop and enjoy that longer stay. So where do you think some of the best regions are that you can travel around by train? Because I think some are better than others.
Yeah, I think some are definitely better than others, but I would say don't be put off by any region. It's just a case of some require more planning than others. One good one I do think that springs immediately to mind is Umbria. I think that's fantastic for traveling by train. And actually, Umbria, as opposed to neighboring Tuscany's got all the big kind of cities. It's got the Florence, Pisa, Siena. Umbria is much more small hilltop towns, but actually you can reach them using the train network very easily. So Orvieto and Spoleto, for example, they're hilltop towns, but the train comes to the bottom of those towns. But then there are elevators or funiculars that take you up to the historic old part of the town. So super easy to do. Spello is, for me, a fantastic town. It's one of my favorite places in Italy. And you can walk from the train station into the historic part of Spello very easily. Assisi is probably one that's harder, and it's probably Umbria's most well-known town because it drops you at the bottom and you probably need to get a bus up, certainly if it's in the summer, because it's quite hot and you'll be very sweaty by the time you reach Assisi. But you could base yourself in Spello and then cycle across to Assisi, for example, or even walk across if you're a keen walker. So yeah, Umbria, I think, is a fantastic one to discover smaller places using public transport.
Yeah, honestly, Umbria is like, I'm on a mission. We just did a podcast about the reasons that we love this region, and it's, we didn't even touch on this bit, but it's like, it's so beautiful and it's so kind of untouched really in a lot of ways. Like the people are so excited to see you because they're not jaded by, thousands and thousands of visitors. They're just genuinely happy to see people coming to see what their life's like and take part in it. I think it's really beautiful there.
I agree. I think it's a fantastic region. So yeah, one of my favourite regions of Italy, definitely.
Is there any others that you think are particularly good by train?
I think we've mentioned it already, but the Italian lakes, I think, is fantastic by train. So on both Como Maggiore, for example, the trains go along the eastern side. So depending on where you want to go, but once you're there and you've got to the lake by train, again, then you can use public transport and get around by boat. And if you think about it, a couple of 100 years ago, the roads wouldn't have existed in the way they do now around the lake. It would have been very much getting around by boat. So the public transport there is superb. And then, Tuscany, we've mentioned, I think Tuscany is a great one to do by train as well. But that tends to be more if you're wanting to go to slightly bigger places. So the transport links are fantastic, but you're talking about going from Florence to Lucca, Siena, Cortona, Arezzo, for example. Some of the hilltop towns there aren't as easy to access as they would be in Umbria. So you do tend to have to add a bus journey on or a taxi ride. But if you're happy to go to some of the more well-known places, then Tuscany does work as well.
I think let's just go into the lakes a little bit because I think people are really interested. I know, like with Como, just from my knowledge having been there before, you can go to Como City, which I love. Como City, I really think it's a really lovely place, and it's one of those small Italian cities that's just got a nice little local vibe to it. I really like it. I don't know what it is about it, but I really like it. And you can also get to Verona, can't you? And up and Lecco and up that end of the Y axis.
Yeah. So there are direct trains from Milan that go to Como and Lecco. And then the railway basically spans the whole length from Lecco up to Colico. So there's a number of stops. It doesn't always kind of skim the lakeside, but you can certainly get up to Varenna. And then, using the other stops, you can then get the boat across to the other side of the lake if you wanted to go to Menaggio or across there. So super easy. And it's a stunning journey. It's beautiful. And I think that's the other thing about traveling by train. It's just being able to sit and enjoy the view. Some of the train journeys in Italy are just stunning. And actually to be able to sit back, relax, have a drink and enjoy the view rather than worrying about cars on the road is fantastic. So yeah, just sit back and enjoy.
You can also get to Desenzano and Pesseria in Lake Garda by train quite easily too.
Yeah, they're all kind of accessible, but the trains don't go all the way around the lakes, but they don't need to because, as I said, you just then hop on a boat. So you use a combination of public transport options to get you around. And you can get Lake Orta as well. You can get a train to Lake Orta, and the train station there, it's a 2-kilometer walk along the lake to kind of get to the kind of main piazza in Orta San Giulio, which is the main town on Lake Orta. So, again, if you were basing yourself on one of the lakes, you can use the trains to get to the other lakes and see them as well. So, yeah.
Where does that train line go from Lake Orta, Jo? Because we drove there and it's like literally one of my favourite places in the whole of Italy. And I didn't see the train station. So would you go from Milan or would you go from Turin?
Now you've got me. I think you can go from Milan. I was looking at it the other day to get from Lake Maggiore, and I can't remember kind of where it stopped. But the train station is Orta Messino Station, it's called, and it's 2 kilometres from Lake Orta. But it's certainly it's walkable.
I think that's one of the most beautiful walks you'll ever do too. Like, it's so beautiful there.
Completely. And driving to Orta San Giulio is a nightmare because it's, parking's limited and then trying to get in. So actually it's a more relaxing way of getting there, certainly in peak season.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it'd be really crazy. Another region that I think is quite good for trains is actually Liguria, because I actually refuse to drive in Liguria because it's scary. But that train line that goes up and down from La Spezia up to Genoa, there's so many cute towns and villages along there. Like, I just think it's sensational. And I don't understand. This is another one. I don't understand why people don't go there because it's really beautiful and, you can get a really different taste of coastal life in Italy that's not rammed with tourists, basically.
Yeah, completely. I agree. I mean, the train journey of people wanting to do the Cinque Terre as well, then, you can get the train to each of those villages in the Cinque Terre. But the Italian coastline, Liguria down to Tuscany, it kind of all runs down and it's brilliant. If you're wanting to spend time on the coast, the train's a great way to explore it.
So we stayed last time when we were in Liguria in Levanto, and that was a really unique experience because it was very European and it was more Dutch, German, French, Belgian tourists. It was maybe staying there for a week and doing kind of what we're suggesting and, having that time at the beach club, finding where they want to get their favourite pizza and, maybe doing a boat tour out along the coast at sunset when everyone's sort of disappeared back onto the cruise ships for the day and really enjoying that beautiful, beautiful coastline.
Well, you're selling it to me. I'm like, I just want to be there now.
I know. It's like, yeah, it's one of those places. And I mean, I'd really like to explore the Adriatic coast because that's probably the area that I don't know the most, up the Marche and then the Emilia coastline up there, because I feel like I don't know how well that's served, but I feel like that's just kind of like an area that's going to take off at some point with English-speaking travellers wanting to get a little bit further away from the coast.
Yeah. It's funny because we have villas in Marche and it's the most beautiful area, and it's not an area I know as well as some of the others. I haven't been there as frequently, but Marche is absolutely stunning. But it's one of those regions that you can say Marche and people will go, oh, where's that? And some people haven't, even heard of it and even know it's in Italy, but it's beautiful. Some fantastic beaches along there, but the most incredible countryside as well. It ticks all the boxes. an amazing history. Everyone thinks of Florence for Renaissance, but actually there's so incredible Renaissance art in Marche. It's beautiful.
Urbino is there, and Ascoli Piceno, and some beautiful cities they have there too. Oh my goodness. And I just was thinking then as well, Puglia actually, even though the train is pretty slow down there, there is a fast speed train from Rome to Bari, which takes about 4 hours. But then the train down from Bari is actually pretty good because it takes you to Monopoli and Polignano. I did that a couple of years ago, and it was easy, like a 1 hour trip actually, just from Monopoli to Bari. It was easy.
Yeah, I think Puglia, if you're spending the whole time there, it's not as easy by train. It requires a bit more planning, but it's certainly possible. So you mentioned Polignano, Monopoli, Bari, they have train stations. So does Ostuni, Rotondo. So you can certainly explore a fair amount of Puglia by train. It tends to be slower, the trains kind of between some of these smaller places, but definitely possible. Just requires a little more planning, I would say.
Yeah, and I think just maybe avoiding Sundays. They might be having lunch, so, which is very important. Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Like I think about the Cinque Terre, which is probably actually, when you think about it, one of the best connected areas by train, and that's probably what makes it so easy to visit really, is because they do have that train connecting the 5 villages that goes very quickly. And it's one of those catch-22 kind of things. But I think if you go up out of the villages into the countryside, just a bit behind the train stations there, I think there's so much magic to be had there around that area. People kind of just squeeze into these little areas. They just miss maybe some of the real beauty that can be had.
No, I agree.
Right. Is there any other favourite towns that you think, right, if anyone was going to go by train, which is a town that you would recommend?
For me, Spello, I've mentioned in Umbria. If we kind of look back at the other regions, if I was in Tuscany and wanting to go by train somewhere, I would use Lucca as a base probably because it's that little bit smaller, not quite as busy. Cinque Terre, you mentioned, I think you said you stayed in Levante. Another option to stay in is Porto Venere. And then that's not actually connected by train, but you can get a bus then very easily and then use the train network. Puglia, Polignano, I think I would probably stay in, or Ostuni, and use that as my base. Amalfi Coast we didn't mention actually, and Amalfi Coast is not well connected by trains. The Amalfi Coast, though, you could actually get a train very easily down to Sorrento, use Sorrento as a base, and then from there the only kind of train station is the far end of the Amalfi Coast at Vietri sul Mare, but you could use the buses to get from Sorrento, and I think Sorrento is a lovely base, and use the buses and the boats again to get around. So yeah, I think it's just finding somewhere for me as a base that's quieter, but that has enough that you can stay there for a whole week or 2 weeks and then use it for day trips. It has kind of good connections to get you out and about. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Salerno could be another option on the southern end of the Amalfi Coast, because they've got a pretty good train station. That's actually on the fast speed line from Rome. So, and it's got access to the southern Amalfi Coast. There's a lot of things to do around there. And if people have been listening to the show, they know I had my birthday down there last year.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. You will get their life-changing buffalo mozzarella in that area. So, yeah, it's amazing down there. But so, like, in these towns, you have properties there, don't you, in some of these places? Do you have any properties in Umbria, in Spello, that people could rent?
We've got a number of properties in Umbria, and I think we've got about half a dozen just in Spello. And all the properties we have in Spello are within the historic centre. So you can walk up from the train station to stay there, but actually then you're easy walking distance to all the restaurants, the bars, the cafes, the shops. And if you're in Spello, I mentioned it briefly before, but there's an e-bike hire shop in Spello. So you can hire e-bikes, and there's a beautiful cycle route from Spello through vineyards and olive groves to Assisi, which is absolutely fantastic. It's mostly flat, although when I did it couple of years ago, and we decided, my husband and I were there, and we cycled to Assisi, and we were with our two teenagers. And my husband and I decided we would go and cycle a different way back and make kind of a longer trip of it. And I said, oh, well, we'll just go up that hill and we'll do that. It was a mountain. It was not a hill. And these e-bikes kind of were giving up, and I realized we could only put them on the lower settings. It was literally hours up this hill. So I'm not sure if I would recommend that on the e-bikes we had, but in theory, if you had a good one. But that's stunning. And Spello is such a beautiful town. It's got some incredible Roman remains. They've got a museum there with some kind of remains from a villa and some incredible mosaics, wonderful restaurants. And that's very much, you mentioned going into a cafe and they'll know your order. That's exactly the sort of place where that would happen very quickly. And breakfast for a family of four, you can get for under €10. If you want your cornetti and your coffees, and geez, it's incredible. So yeah, that's a wonderful place to stay. And we've got a lot of properties, as I say, in Spello and within kind of other areas of Umbria.
So how does it work, Jo? Do you need to commit to like a length of stay, or is it flexible?
It varies on the property. So increasingly, we are seeing property owners happy to be more flexible. Some still in July, August will have a 7-day minimum stay. Off season, you tend to get kind of more 4 nights. I would say that with a self-catering property, kind of 1 or 2 night stays don't typically work. They don't tend to be then a great choice economically. And it's not really worth the owners kind of renting them for 1 night, the amount of cleaning required and the turnover. They just can't turn it over quick enough. So I would say, most off season might be 4 nights, and then peak season, anything between kind of 5 and 7 nights. But there's definitely more flexibility. And whereas in the past, properties tended to be very much Saturday to Saturday and peak season, again, there's more flexibility now. So I think things have changed, which is good news, I think, for the traveller.
Yeah, I think so too. And like you can get variety of different types of apartments as well. Like I'm just scrolling your website now. There's so many ones with pools there, which would be delightful in summer. And like everything from a small, cozy little cottage to absolutely stunning villas with, what are these pools? They're amazing. What are they called? Infinity pools.
Yeah, there are some incredible places, definitely. I mean, our intention is that whatever your budget, we'll have somewhere really nice for you to stay. So whether you're spending €1,000 or €10,000 or even more, and whatever your group size, because we recognize some people are traveling, just as a solo traveler or a couple. We'll try and have some smaller options as well as places for multi-generation trips or people traveling kind of in larger groups. And we are seeing more of that people are traveling in bigger groups these days. It's maybe the grandparents traveling with the children and the grandchildren, or it's couples traveling together. And you do tend to get a lot more value for your money when you do travel in a larger group. So if you're sociable and happy to travel with others, it can be a very good way of doing it.
Yeah. Do you know, oh my gosh, this one in Puglia, I'm just like, it's so cheap. It's this absolutely stunning Trullo place, and I'm going to give a shout out to my listener, beautiful Vicky, who comes on our tours. This is like, I think this would be her dream home, to be honest. Like it's made from the beautiful Trulli houses surrounded by olive trees. Oh,
I love the Trulli. They're just so beautiful, so beautiful. And I think, I was doing some work the other day, and you look at the absolute cost of some of these places and you think, oh, that's high. But actually, when you break it down per person, it can come in at, €50 a night. And for this absolutely spectacular place, it kind of seems too good to be true. But yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, there's something about Puglia, the way they do their decoration, they've really made their stamp on like a particular style, and it's very elegant and modern, but it still has a nod to their past. And I really admire what they do. It's just stunning. They've really found a way to take those historic elements but modernize it and make everything look really nice, like really luxe actually.
I agree. I think they've done a fantastic job. I think, they're starting with some absolutely incredible buildings. I mean, these truly are so old. They have so much character. And yet they kind of take this very old historic building and then give this contemporary twist in terms of the interior decor. And the result is incredible. And when they build new structures, I mean, you'll get kind of modern versions of Truly, but they're done so tastefully that actually you can't tell that they're a modern build because they look like a Truly that's been there for 200 years, or more. They're absolutely fantastic. I mean, Italy is known for its design, but definitely Puglia are nailing it when it comes to interior design at the moment.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, when you go into the north, and I'm thinking of Venice in particular, and they've got that kind of Baroque Rococo thing going on, and it's kind of was like, oh, it's a bit much for me, and even in the north, they haven't really twigged onto that pared back modern style. I think they need to go down to Puglia and take a look, I think.
But it's what you were saying, isn't it? It's the difference between the regions. And actually, it's like holidaying in a completely different country. It really is, because the food's different, the landscape's different, the design and where you're staying has a completely different feel. So that's what makes it wonderful, isn't it? That's Italy.
That is Italy. And I think last trip that I did, we went from right in South Tyrol to down to, the south. And it couldn't be more different if you tried. But speaking of South Tyrol, that's actually, if you go to Bolzano by train, which is connected to Rome on the fast speed train network, the bus network from Bolzano is actually incredible. So maybe you should go and get some villas there. I think you might need to take a trip to South Tyrol, but you'll need to polish up your German.
German I'm not good at. Never learned German.
They'll do Italian at a pinch, but I mean, I think that's an absolutely stunning area. I agree. It's really up and coming area. Oh.
Well, I'll add that to my Italian bucket list. That's one I haven't ticked off yet, so I'll add that to my list.
Definitely worth it, and especially if you like dumplings.
Okay.
And apple strudel, because I have a lot of that.
Apple strudel, I'm in.
Yeah, I know, so good. Oh, Jo, this has been great. I love your positive attitude to this. I guess, if you're going for an extended period of time, you should definitely take advantage of this style of travel and this style of accommodation, because, you can still go out to a restaurant, but if you want to have a day off eating out, or 3, like I'm going to have to do next week when I'm over there, it's easy. You can just, buy a few little bits from the market and get your cheese and settle in.
Exactly. And that kind of buying from the market, again, it's experiencing Italian life and culture. There's nothing better than going to the market and buying food that's been grown just within, normally a 10-mile radius, and it tastes incredible. And, you don't need to do any fancy preparation. You just eat exactly what you bought and it'll taste wonderful. So, cooking at home is not hard work in Italy because you've got these fantastic ingredients to use.
I call it assembling, not cooking.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, even the fruit, I just think about the figs and, oh, so good. It's coming into summer over there. It's going to be delicious.
Just the smell of the market is amazing.
It really is. If anyone wants to know how to behave at the market, we won't go into this now, but we did an episode just recently on etiquette. But basically, don't touch the produce. Let them do it for you. Otherwise, they might not be friendly in the village. No, they'll be fine, but just read up on what the etiquette is before you go. Okay, Jo, thank you so much for sharing all of this amazing information about the towns and regions where we can get around. It's really helpful information because I think people just think, no, I have to drive or I'm sort of stuck to the major cities, but there's definitely so many opportunities to go and stay in a lovely Italian village or a town. And so because I know you also share so much useful information for people travelling to Italy on your blog and other channels, how can our listeners stay in touch with you?
So if they want to take a look at our website, they're looking for accommodation. Our website is bookingsforyou.com. So that's FOR, not the number 4. So bookingsforyou.com. And if you just do /blog at the end, you'll find our blog. And that's got loads of information, practical tips on traveling in Italy, like don't touch the fruit at the market, as well as guides to towns, cities. So if you're looking for a smaller base, we're likely to have a guide on smaller towns and villages where you can stay. You can also reach out to us at our Facebook and Twitter. which is bookings for you, or we're on Instagram as well, bookings for you, but with an underscore in between each word. So yeah, it'd be lovely to hear from people. If you're looking for accommodation, then please do say that you heard us on the podcast or through Untold Italy, because then we can give people a discount on their stay.
How about that? And I'm just looking on your blog and you've got villas in Puglia by train.
There you go.
You don't even have to search very hard. We'll put a link to that in our podcast notes, but you don't have to search very hard. Oh, my God, this one looks amazing. The 5-bedroom with the pool. Oh, my gosh. Sign me up. Oh, I can see a sunbed there for me right now. That looks amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's really good to just have a browse of see what's possible, I think, as well. And I know that Jo has so much passion for Italy and sharing these beautiful places. The website's a wealth of information, but also, the property is absolutely gorgeous too. So grazie, Jo. You are such a wealth of knowledge about the regions of Italy and all its surprising little towns. And thank you so much for joining us on Untold Italy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yay. Thank you. Grazie. Ciao. Exploring regional Italy is possible without a car if you spend a little time doing some research and are committed to taking at least a part of your trip a little slowly. I wouldn't recommend dipping into these spots for a day, as you'll be spending most of your time travelling to and from. But if you can carve out 3 or 4 days, you'll reap the rewards of some of the most enchanting experiences you're ever likely to have in Italy. If you want the details of the places Jo mentioned, then head over to the show notes at untolditaly.com/215 for episode number 215. And you'll find them all there, plus details of Jo's company, Bookings for You, where you can discover lots of amazing information about travelling in Italy on the blog. There's also a fantastic article about some of their villas that you can reach by train in beautiful Puglia. Grazie. Thank you so much for listening to our show. We love it that people from all over the world tune in and dream of Italy together. If you have a moment, we would so appreciate it if you could leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast app. That's all for today. I can't wait to share next week's episode with you, which is all about a region we mentioned a lot in this episode, Umbria. But until then, it's ciao for now. The Untold Italy podcast is an independent production. Podcast editing, audio production and website development by Mark Hatter, production assistance and content writing by the other Katy Clarke. Yes, there are 2 of us. For more information about Untold Italy, please visit untolditaly.com.